Final approach. Autopilot engaged, then a sudden jolt. Autopilot disconnect blares. Your heart spikes. This is the startle effect, a primitive reflex that can freeze cognition for up to 10 seconds. A 2017 FAA study found 68% of pilots reported a startle event. Unexpected autopilot disconnects are a common trigger, impairing cognition for up to 10 seconds. But the disconnect itself is just the beginning. A cascade of alerts follows, a confusing cacophony that delays diagnosis. So what triggers this cascade? A sudden shift from automated flight to raw manual control, often announced by a startling oral alert. Common triggers include exceeding bank limits, sensor failures, or inadvertent side stick input. In Boeing aircraft, exceeding a 30-degree bank triggers an automatic disconnect with a red flashing master warning. The startle effect can delay response. Airbus disconnects when the pilot applies over 5 down on the side stick, often inadvertently during turbulence or a startle. Other triggers include sensor failures, airspeed limits, and mode transitions. Understanding these triggers is the first step to staying ahead of the surprise. But what happens inside a pilot's mind? The startle effect. A primitive reflex, a cognitive freeze lasting up to 10 seconds. Remember that 68% figure? The brain defaults to instinct, often the wrong one. During those seconds, the pilot's ability to diagnose is impaired. The NTSB notes startle can cause freezing, fixating, or inappropriate reactions, turning a routine disconnect into a crisis. This is most dangerous during low-altitude maneuvers. With seconds to act, a startled crew may misinterpret, turning a routine disconnect into disaster. When does inconvenience become catastrophe? An unexpected autopilot disconnect during a go-around. The crew is startled with seconds to react. On July 6, 2013, Asiana Flight 214 was executing a go-around when the autopilot disconnected. The startled crew fixated on the glide path, failing to monitor airspeed, leading to a stall and crash. The NTSB found startle caused the pilot to pull back on the controls, exacerbating the stall. Freeze, fixate, or react inappropriately. Boeing data shows loss of autopilot contributes to about 10% of approach and landing accidents. 1 in 10 involves this surprise. Why does surprise persist despite training? A 2020 survey found 42% of pilots experience an unexpected disconnect during a critical phase. The problem isn't just startle, it's mode complexity that compounds the surprise. Consider the A320, 7 autopilot modes, each with its own disconnect logic. Mode confusion can make a simple disconnect feel chaotic. Add a cavalcade of warnings, oral alerts, master caution lights, and alert fatigue sets in. The critical autopilot disconnect may be lost in noise. But training can help. UPRT, upset prevention and recovery training, reduces startle response time by up to 30% in simulators, giving pilots precious extra seconds. CRM now incorporates startle scenarios, mandatory in some airlines since 2019. Pilots rehearse until the response becomes instinctive. Know your aircraft's modes cold. A pilot who understands each trigger is less likely to be surprised when the oral warning cuts through. But what about the subtle cues? A soft click, a mode change on the PFD, these can precede a disconnect. Pilots who recognize these precursors can anticipate the surprise and prepare. So why does startle hit so hard? It's a survival reflex. Your brain prioritizes speed over accuracy. In the cockpit, that means grabbing the controls without thinking, which can worsen the situation. Consider Qantas Flight 72 in 2008. A sudden autopilot disconnect due to faulty sensor data led to 2 violent pitch downs. The crew, startled but trained, managed to land safely. Training made the difference. This is automation surprise. When the autopilot behaves unexpectedly, it's not just the disconnect, it's the mode reversion or uncommanded mode change that catches crews off guard. Interviews with pilots reveal a pattern. The disconnect often happens during high workload phases, approach, go-around, or turbulence. The resulting surprise then compounds the workload, creating a vicious cycle. So how do you recover? First, fly the aircraft, then silence the alerts, then diagnose. This sequence, aviate, navigate, communicate, is drilled into every pilot, but startle can break the chain. Some airlines teach the 5-second rule: pause, breathe, then act. This breaks the freeze response. In simulators, this simple technique reduces inappropriate control inputs by 40%. CRM plays a key role. A non-flying pilot who recognizes startle in their colleague can call it out, "You're startled, I have control." This cross-check can prevent a cascade of errors. Simulator training now includes surprise scenarios, a sudden disconnect during a critical phase. Pilots who practice these are 50% less likely to freeze in real events. Without training, startle leads to loss of control. In 2018, a cargo flight crashed after an autopilot disconnect during a go-around. The crew never recovered from the initial shock. Regulators are taking note. EASA now requires startle training in all type ratings. The FAA is updating advisory circulars to emphasize automation surprise. Change is coming, but culture matters too. In some airlines, admitting startle is seen as weakness. Changing that mindset, making it okay to say, "I'm startled," can improve safety. Technology can help too. Newer aircraft have auto-recovery systems that engage if the pilot doesn't respond. But over-reliance on these can create new surprises. The bottom line, autopilot disconnects will happen. Startle is human. But with training, CRM, and awareness, you can turn surprise into a controlled response. Stay ahead. In that first second after the disconnect, your brain floods with adrenaline. Heart rate jumps, palms sweat, vision narrows. This is the physiological startle response, evolved to protect us from predators, not from a mode reversion. But there's a difference between startle and surprise. Surprise is cognitive. You expected A, you got B. Startle is physical, a reflex. The real danger is when startle amplifies surprise, turning a simple mode change into a full-blown upset. So how do you train for startle? Not just in the simulator, but in real time. Some airlines use sudden loud noises or unexpected motion in the sim to trigger the reflex, then coach pilots to recover. Repetition builds automaticity. A simple technique. When you hear the disconnect, take a 3-second breath before touching anything. That pause breaks the startle cycle. Studies show it reduces inappropriate control inputs by 40% and gives the prefrontal cortex time to re-engage. But individual techniques aren't enough. Crew coordination is critical. The non-flying pilot must monitor for startle cues, wide eyes, frozen posture, rapid breathing, and take control if needed. A simple, "I have control" can break the spell. In 2019, a Delta crew faced an autopilot disconnect at 400 feet during a go-around. The captain later said he felt the startle, but training kicked in. He breathed, called out the mode change, and the crew recovered. No accident, just a lesson. But complacency is the enemy. When you've flown hundreds of hours without a disconnect, you stop expecting it. That's when the startle hits hardest. Regular refresher training, even just mental rehearsal, keeps the response sharp. So remember, autopilot disconnects are not emergencies. They are events. The startle response is normal. But with training, breathing, and crew coordination, you can turn that moment of surprise into a controlled, safe recovery. Fly the plane first. So next time you hear autopilot disconnect, remember, startle is normal, but training turns freeze into fluid response. Stay ahead.